My name's Kerry Dalton. I'm from Bundaberg Regional Council, and today we're going to talk to you about a little issue that we had with our regional group of councils running out of airspace. So Wide Bay Burnett region is located up in Queensland, just north of Brisbane. We cover an area of about 48,000 square kilometres, and we're tucked in there between Brisbane, Darling Downs and Fitzroy regions. The Wide Bay Burnett Regional Organisation of Councils was formed in 1999. Originally we had, I'll move forward, we had 22 council members, which you can imagine sitting around the table trying to make decisions proved to be a bit difficult. Luckily, council amalgamations reduced that down to a more manageable 6, so we started to see some actions and really the introduction of some really smart initiatives. So Webb Rock is made up of Bundaberg, Gympie, Fraser Coast, North Burnett, South Burnett and Cherbourg councils, and we have a combined population of close to 300,000 people. The Waste Committee was formed in 2012 and was formally adopted by Webb Rock in 2013. Our objectives were and still are to look for ways to reduce waste and recycling more effectively within a regional context through regional procurement, sharing knowledge and ideas, and educational and promotional opportunities. To date, we've developed a package of educational packages. We've done some media campaigns to look at recycling within the region. And we've also shared a lot of documents for operational procedures and processes. In 2013, Webb Rock Waste Group developed a regional waste strategy, which focused on 7 key strategy goals. Investigate regional waste collection services, investigate opportunities for current landfills that meet the region's short and long-term waste disposal needs, provide opportunities to reduce waste disposal to landfill, provide community waste education, investigate opportunities for regional procurement of services and shared procurement, investigate regional landfill or alternative disposal options, and investigate landfill rehabilitation provisions. Probably one of the most significant collaborative projects to date, aside from this one, of course, has been a regional water quality tender that we went out for probably about a year ago now to provide surface and groundwater monitoring services for all the councils. This contract has now been in place for close to a year, and not only has it provided all our council members with cost savings, it has allowed our smaller councils to be able to fully participate in a monitoring program, which was pretty much unfeasible for them in the past. So, what about waste management? Our current population sits at 292,000 and it's expected to grow to more than 430 by 2031, and waste generation rates are equivalent to approximately 700 kilos per person per annum. We have some management options, which obviously trying to manage that waste within our region is critically important, and our higher than normal waste rates can be attributed in part to a lack of recycling services within the region and underdeveloped C&D recovery. Critical to the urgency of this is the remaining airspace, or lack thereof, for some of our councils, particularly Gympie with only 3 years remaining. Fraser Coast has 8 years and South Burnett with 10. And I'm sure most of you in this room know how long it takes to actually build a landfill. Proximity to the southeast corner provides some benefit, but distance is enough of a problem for some of us to be cost prohibitive. And of course, we could always continue to go up, but who wants a mountain of waste in their backyard? Traditionally, each council has managed its waste solutions individually. However, after the success of other collaborative projects and our commitment to our regional waste strategy, we decided to explore options for regional landfills or alternative disposal. So make sure I'm on track here. So restrictive timelines guided our options to more traditional approaches, including either finding a new landfill within the region or sending our waste out to other regions such as landfills down in Ipswich. However, given our approach is to better manage it within our regional area, we decided to go out to tender to develop a scoping document to consider what options we had available and some of the associated financial implications for a regional landfill. We wanted the report to consider transport costs for all councils depending on the location of the site. Would it be viable to consider one landfill, or should we be looking at a north and south option? Should Bundaberg continue to use Arceda's road landfill, open it up as a regional landfill for the entire Webrock group, or close it and transport waste to a more larger centrally located facility? Was the site at Gympie a feasible option for our Webrock landfill? How would it be managed? Would a single council manage it, third party or alliance? And would we end up with another mountain of waste? So as a result, we went out, we engaged ATC Williams, and I'm going to hand it over to you, to Rowan now, to talk to how they actually modelled that for us.
Thank you, Kerry. So the real question that we were looking at was it was in the best interests of each local government authority to develop a Webrock regional landfill. And AWT was considered, but a new landfill was indeed required for the residual tonnages. There were some aspects around the C&D and green waste that could be improved, but it was primarily looking at a new landfill. So the services that we were looking at considering to have jointly delivered were residual waste haulage and residual waste disposal at landfill. The ownership and the operation of the transfer stations, the long haul transfer stations, some of which existed and some of which would need construction, would be up to the individual councils, although they may individually subcontract some of those elements. What it all came down to really was the economies of scale. When you have large amounts of waste, you can come down the cost curve quite significantly. This means that compared to, say, two councils who have 50,000 tonnes per year, individually developing and running and operating their own landfills, if that tonnage is combined into a single 100,000 tonnes, the cost savings over the life, operation and decommissioning of the landfill are not just linearly lower, they're exponentially lower. So cost saving is what it's all about. And the reason that this happens is all about efficiency. Essentially, you can get more efficient operation out of each your individual labour unit and also your equipment as well. So the economics seem to be simple. Everything seems to stack up. Let's go ahead and do it, surely. However, reality isn't quite as simple as just pure economic theory. There were quite a few issues that we needed to consider. First of all was the timing. Because each of the regional councils had quite a different day zero when they were running out of waste, some of them had a stronger desire to look for a new solution quicker than others, particularly Gympie with the shortest time frame, followed by Fraser Coast and then South Burnett. It was also an issue of how to do cost equity because the different councils, of course, had different waste tonnages. Particularly for Gympie, at the tonnages it was looking at, when you considered the cost curve again, they were definitely sitting on the higher end of the curve. This meant for them, even though they had the advantage of a new site at the Talara within their local government region that was approved for a new landfill, the costs of developing that and doing it for themselves over the longer term would be prohibitive. Fraser Coast on the other hand, with its greater tonnages, was sitting more in the middle of the range. What this meant is that although they had a medium term that they would be definitely needing new landfill, the costs were large but not so great that they couldn't consider the possibility of going alone. Similarly, for Bundaberg, with its existing best practice operations, it has a lot of airspace, and so therefore it is in a relatively good position. South Burnett, on the other hand, have already made the decision that within the term that they would run out of landfill, that they would be not developing new landfill within their local government authority, but they were in a better position because there were several options for them to be able to send their waste to. Cherbourg, although it has low tonnages, does continue to struggle with environmental issues with local disposal of waste. And North Burnett has a very low cost doing business as usual. So even if the cost curve over the longer term meant that they would save money, the upfront capital costs of even just building a long-haul transfer station would be very significant for a small council such as them. So what we did in the study, which was a very cooperative effort, lots of meetings and discussions with the Webrock group, was to look at a cooperation model for the entity that might procure the desired services, what the procurement might actually look like, the ownership of the regional landfill, and operation and maintenance, aftercare, liability and funding. So here's a brief slide showing the outcomes of what it took to create the principal entity that would deliver those services. So perhaps in some ways it's interesting what got ruled out as well as what got left in, and just to point out that all these, even the ones that are left in, are still at a fairly preliminary stage, and there'll be further discussions with the ACCC and state government if this developed further on. So what was left was either the lead council, where probably where the landfill was located would take the role as a principal, or possibly an alliance arrangement would create the entity. In terms of, again, procuring the airspace services from the principal entity, a number of options were considered, and what was left again was either a standard head contract arrangement or some type of alliance arrangement. Privatisation and public-private partnerships were ruled out by the Webrock grouping at this particular time. In terms of the residual waste transport services in the trucks, really the individual councils considered but then rejected the idea of running their own waste transport fleets. And what was also previously considered as well was whether a joint third party would do it, but in this particular case it was considered that it would either be from the principal, or the principal may then subcontract that service to a private third party. The landfill ownership options, really it was probably most likely to remain with the council where the regional landfill was located, although it wasn't ruled out that either the principal entity itself could take on ownership, or there could be a joint arrangement between that entity and the council, although there's some complexities, of course, in both those arrangements, but that was still left on the table at this present time. Webrock itself wasn't a particularly suitable entity to take on that type of risk. The debt funding options was relatively straightforward, almost certainly through councils because of the cost of capital, and the aftercare liability of any facility would be charged continuously. So we built a model, and there was lots of spreadsheets and lots of detail in that model, but although all the elements were in there, we ran quite a lot of scenarios and so forth. What I'll probably focus on, rather than the horrid details of that model, is the actual results. And really, it is all about the solutions here. So in terms of the timing, with Gympie as the council facing the most acute timing issue, the solution for them was to consider a short-term stopgap of transport of their waste outside the regional local government area, most likely to the Ipswich region in southeast Queensland, although there's some other possibilities of other councils perhaps. The other consideration in terms of the timing was that for Bundaberg, it only made really sense that minimal tonnages from the Childers region, which is in the south of Bundaberg, would be incorporated within any regional landfill, and that the Cedars Road landfill itself did not make sense to become the regional landfill because of its distance from the southern waste generators. And this also leads to the siting study. Basically, there was a consideration of where are the major waste tonnages coming from, and therefore the closer a regional landfill is to those waste tonnages, the more effective and economic it is for the haulages, which is very simple when you only have one generating node and therefore one landfill, but when you have a few together, plus the realities of where sites can be, it becomes a little more complicated. But the outcome in this particular case was it did show that from a haulage point of view, the Talara landfill, which Gympie has down in the south, did make a haul efficient location for a regional landfill. However, should Fraser Coast Regional Council decide that they indeed were going to go ahead with a regional landfill located within their local government authority, because of the cost curve, it would still make sense for Gympie to, in particular, and probably even South Burnett, to join into such a regional landfill. What it also then showed is that although there's lots of space, locating the landfills out in the North Burnett region, or for that matter in the South Burnett or Bundaberg region, just didn't add up from a haulage point of view. In terms of the cost equity though, again, because the smaller councils in the North Burnett, Cherbourg and even South Burnett had the smaller tonnages, even if there was a cost-sharing model, particularly under an alliance structure, where every council paid the same dollars per tonne rate at their transfer station picked up, then although this was an effective subsidy of some of the smaller councils by the larger councils, the numbers did add up because partly because the additional tonnages helped drive that cost curve a little bit down, and secondly because particularly from councils like North Burnett, even though they were a long way away, their tonnages were very, very small compared to the overall. So that sort of cost sharing model was possible under a potential alliance structure, and it would also make it easier for some of the smaller councils to join into such a regional grouping if they wish to. Now, the issue, of course, though, about politics does remain, because as you probably all know, two things are particularly difficult in the waste world is getting a new landfill and closing an old one, and this was a bit of both. Partly it's because of having a landfill in a local government sense located within your local government area. Receiving outside waste can be seen as a bit of an issue, but that was seen to be mitigated a bit by creating this new principle in an alliance or even a head contract fashion, where it would be slightly divorced from the council's contributing, so it became its own entity and running and operating that landfill. Now, even so, the politics of waste does remain, and it does mean that letting go can be particularly hard, particularly for some of the larger councils. But even in that case, if a regional landfill was located, for example, in the Fraser Coast region, it would still make a lot of sense for Gympie, probably even South Burnett, to join in with it. So that then leads us to the conclusions, where I'll now hand over again to Kerry to tell you what happened and, more importantly, what's happening now.
Okay, so what did we decide to do? In short, we haven't decided anything yet. It's not been long since we completed the process, so we're still discussing it and as individual councils trying to determine what our best options are. So for Fraser Coast and Gympie, a regional landfill is a really viable potential option. Both councils are currently using data from the report to determine the most efficient and cost-effective path forward. The contentious issue is, as Rowan pointed out, the politics around deciding who's going to give up their own landfill and join forces with the neighbours to move waste out of the region. So that's always going to be an issue, and one we're still struggling to change. For South Burnett, it's confirmed what I guess they knew, but it's the figures are there now to support developing that a local landfill within the South Burnett region was not going to be economically feasible. It's helping them to now focus on future waste management decisions around where they should establish a bulk waste transfer station, as well as where they should dispose of their waste. They have a number of options for waste disposal sites. So the next step for them is to determine where they're going to go, and in the short, long and medium term, what's going to be the most economical option for them. For Bundaberg, for us, we pretty much confirmed that our best option is to continue with business as usual. We've got a really well-run landfill with a lot of space, and while we could look at some of disposal options from our more southern towns like Childers to move that to landfill, we've decided that for us it's better to continue to do what we're doing. It's also provided options for both North Burnett and Cherbourg moving forward. What it did confirm is some of what we knew, and it highlighted to our respective councils that there's potential cost savings that could be achieved through rationalisation of services. So it's probably going to help support the closure of a lot of those smaller facilities to try and move waste into a more centrally located area. We can use this information then to justify, business as usual, maybe just, like I said, closure of some of those facilities and conversion over into transfer stations. With spirit of cooperation, though, we have options to be able to move forward and better manage our waste within our region for now and well into the future. So I think, we've achieved a lot, and thank you, Rowan and ACT Williams, for all their help. So thank you.
Thanks, Kerry. Our next speaker, who I'd like to introduce, is Phil Hoare. So Phil's the Director of Infrastructure at Greater Shepparton City Council, and he'll be talking to us about the Kiala landfill, a beneficial after-use success story. Welcome, Phil.